You may remember a couple of months ago Nigel Farage filling the airwaves with accusations that his free speech had been impinged upon and that Coots, his super elite banking uh, palace, shall we say, that's what it really amounted to, had debanked him for his political views, and that this was an absolute travesty. And not only that, that Farage was going to go on this massive campaign because other people had supposedly been debanked for their political views as well, although there was no evidence for a lot of these things. And ultimately, this is what Farage had gone on non-stop about, that this was going to be a travesty, that this would be a big, shake up for the banking industry, that they would not deny people their freedom of speech. And of course, as people like me were saying, no, that's not what was going on at all. If you want the boring view of this, which is unfortunately what it was, Farage's mortgage had come to an end, which meant he no longer met the minimum wealth requirement to be able to bank at Coots. They had already said, yeah, we don't really want to continue doing business with Farage, so we're just going to not renew his contracts. The bank was well within their rights to do so. And of course, Farage lost his mind over this. And as we said at the time, this was Farage more complaining about that he was losing his very elite privilege status that he had, being able to bank with that bank. Even then, at the time, they were offering him another bank account at a different bank, within the same bank that they were part of. So really, there was no big kerfuffle over this. And then, of course, this all went silent, but Farage was like, oh, don't worry. And the FCC step in. They're going to prove me right. They're going to prove me right. Wait for the FCC. Then we'll find who is at fault here. And oh, look, what's happened. FCC finds no evidence of customers being debanked over political views. So are all those people supporting Nigel Farage going to stop supporting him now and admit they were wrong, that this really wasn't a freedom of speech issue or anything like that? No, there is going to be silence on this. So please do, I encourage you, send this video to anyone who was defending Farage during this time. Because he also, remember, set up a big campaign taking donations to be able to challenge banks on this. What's going to happen to all those donations now, I wonder? Well, who knows? But that's not what we're going to speculate about today. We are going to, of course, look at what the FCC said in regards to this matter. Because, like I say, Farage ain't going to be honest about this because it hasn't gone in his favor. So, as always, please remember to like and share, of course, this video, especially to anyone who is defending Farage. You know, it will be very interesting to see what they've got to say about all this. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. There's the YouTube thank you button. And of course, there is the Pony Club down below as well. And of course, it is a Wednesday. So for the Patreon people and the Pony Clubbers, you will be getting a new video today. So let's have a go on into this and see what they had to say. So the UK's financial regulator has found no evidence showing that bank accounts have been shut or denied accounts to customers based primarily on their political beliefs, according to the preliminary review launched in the wake of Nigel Farage's debanking row. Despite the growing concern that customers have quietly been discriminated against because of their political views, the Financial Conduct Authority said that its initial findings showed that the primary reason for accounts being closed, suspended, or denied was that either the account was inactive or that they had concerns that the customer was involved in a financial crime. While no bank or building society or payment firm reported to us that they had closed accounts primarily due to someone's political views, further work is needed for us to be sure, the FCA chief Nick Hill said. And I'm going to say this now, there will be no further evidence of this. If you have a preliminary investigation that already starts off with, yeah, we really can't find any evidence that this is ongoing, case closed. Everything that we said back just a couple of months ago about Farage and that this was him screaming at the fact that he was really losing his privileged status over this. Yeah, we were right on this. We were right. He was not. This was not a freedom of speech issue. This was not going after him because he was saying the wrong things politically. No, it was what we'd been saying all the time. He did not meet the minimum wealth requirements to have a bank account. They said, we don't, you can't bank with us anymore, but here's another bank account that you can have. That's what happened. And Farage cried like a child because he was losing a very privileged account. Like I say, go and look into all the stuff at the time that came out about what you actually get banking with Coutts. It's absolutely insane the amount of privileges and the lengths that will go to try and satisfy its clientele. But that's what Farage was complaining about, losing, not being able to bank there anymore. So they continued to say that this, of course, will involve the verifying initial data gathered from over the 34 banks and building societies and, of course, payment companies covering the year to June, including cases in which accounts were closed by the customers in a proposed reputational risk. Banks also have the freedom to choose to whom they can do business with. Gee, you hear all these people who claim that they are freedom of speech and that they love to say, all this stuff, but then they forget, no, banks, companies, and businesses have their own freedom over this. So banks have the freedom to choose who they do business with and can legitimately refuse to do business with some individuals who, for example, they may, under sanctions in the UK or abroad, or close associated with such a person. However, the FCA said, we want to assure ourselves that this criteria is not being interpreted too broadly. It said that its payments companies, rather than banks or building societies, accounted for the majority of cases where accounts were closed or denied on the basis of reputational risk. Rashi said that the time was right for a debate on how we balance the access to banks' accounts with the threat of financial crime, as well as firms' reasonable risk and commercial appetites. It is an important question for policymakers, and it is with all individuals, businesses, and organizations should have the right to an account, as in the case in some other countries. While the review is being launched in response to Farage's battle with NatWest private bank Coutts, it is understood that the data does not cover his case, given that the bank never followed through with its closure. Farage said that in July that Coutts' new boss had offered to retain his accounts. The FCA also was looking into whether the politically exposed persons, who included MPs, peers, and leaders of UK political parties and other senior ranking military officers, are unfairly being denied banking services. Banks are required to more closely monitor those accounts and their transactions, and PPEs, since they are considered to be of a higher risk of bribery or corruption. Both issues obviously gained traction after Farage launched his campaign against Coutts, which has been planned to shut his accounts. Again, these whole politically exposed persons, I do sort of agree with that. I think those accounts should be monitored more closely, especially if like MPs, peers, and they should be monitored for watching for bribery and corruption. I think that is a good thing that we should be watching out for. And of course, that was something that came up during this whole Farage example. You had some MPs come forward saying that their wives had been debanked, and stuff like that. So obviously, maybe it's not perfect, but it can be improved. But what Farage went through, as we always said, this idea of it being a freedom of speech issue, it was never a freedom of speech issue. But that's what Farage wanted to turn it into. And again, it has not found any evidence to suggest that that is what is happening, that customers have been denied over their political viewpoint. And I want to make that expressly clear. The FCA has found no evidence so far in its investigation, in its preliminary investigation, to find that. And I guarantee you that will probably follow through in a full report. Because if it hasn't, if this, again, according to Farage, was so widespread and so obvious, why have they not found any evidence initially to point towards that? And I will guarantee you this is what will come of it. And are you going to hear Farage speak about this, be annoyed about this? Probably not, because he's achieved what he wanted to. He's got his elite status back because he made a mountain out of a molehill by being a petulant child and throwing his toys out of the pram because he was losing a very privileged status which he used to enjoy. And that's what has happened in this whole affair. You won't hear any more right wingers talk about this or anything like that from now on, even though this issue of debanking did raise quite some important issues about people losing access to accounts. There was one good thing to come out of this, which was that the 30 days requirement is now being extended to 90 days, which will be a good bonus to people at the end of the day, facing this in some cases. So that will be good. But overall, I want to reiterate this was not a freedom of speech issue. Nothing like that happened. And you're not going to see any more right wingers talk about this because it was not a freedom of speech issue that they wanted to make out of these. Banks suddenly hadn't gone woke. And of course, you won't hear anyone talk about this at all. So, like I say, please do feel free to share this with them. It would be hilarious to see what their response is to these initial findings from the FCA. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.